Pleased to have here on the show, interestingly enough, a segment ago, somebody from Los Angeles called in and said that I am an inspiration to all follically challenged people. And then we went to break saying who's the exact opposite in Los Angeles of being follically challenged. He's our next guest. Now in his 9th season as general manager of the Rams organization.
Wow. Yeah.
Out here in Los Angeles with a brand spanking new Stand Canyon for his team to play in just up the road from us here in the Rich Eisen Show studio. Les Sneed back here on the program. How are you doing, Les?
You know what? A couple of things.
Yes.
Stan Canyon. That's probably that nickname should definitely stick.
Okay, very good.
You can be, some of us can be genetically gifted, right?
Yes.
You can really run fast. You can have hand-eye coordination and
Yes.
hit a baseball a long way. But
Yes.
you can be a GM for 9 years and still not have gray hair. So genetically gifted,
Yes.
passed down good DNA from mom. But I don't know if that means anything in life.
You could. No, Les. I think it means a lot. When you were saying run fast, I literally thought for a split second you were referring to me. Literally for a split second.
I think that's on record. That's not genetically gifted there. And you know what?
Yeah.
And Mike Trout seems to be doing, better with his genetically gifted hand-eye coordination.
In terms of Southern California people, yes, I would agree with that. Now let's start this though a little bit of the personal. You did play for Auburn, correct? You did. How would Les Sneed, the general manager, evaluate Les Sneed, the player, right now?
Well, the better word or semantic to use instead of play was I did practice for Auburn, and I helped a lot of players who did play, and many of those went on to have nice careers in the NFL. I helped them I look at it this way. I helped them get better so that we can compete. And senior year went, undefeated, but we were on probation, and that's kind of the career. So I think as a general manager, I think as a general manager, a Les Sneed evaluation, it would have never gotten to my desk.
It would never. Now, who was your coach? Was that Pat Dye? Were you there when Pat Dye was finishing up there?
There's a Pat Dye, Terry Bowden kind of mix there.
Okay, an overlap. There's an overlap between the Dye, Terry Bowden. Wow. So who were some of your teammates that we would know when you were there?
So let's go. I'll say my last year, a guy named Wayne Gandy, who actually was drafted by the L.A. Rams, but Wayne's someone very gifted in pass protection, so probably played over a decade at left tackle for Rams, probably New Orleans, Pittsburgh Steelers. Was the team. Frank Sanders was a receiver. He played with the Cardinals. So interestingly, right, Wayne and Frank went on. They probably had the longer careers, but were playing for teams at that particular time who weren't really winning. So they weren't household names. So that's what But some more that let's call it flair names. Stephen Davis.
Okay.
But he was a freshman running back when I was probably a senior. So he didn't get on the field when I was there, but he did get on the field later and went to the. So there was a. That's probably how I ended up in the NFL when I ended up GAing there.
Yes.
Kind of your route there is because we did have a lot of prospects like a Willie Anderson who went on to play a long time with the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh, sure.
We had a lot of first round talent, so you did have a lot of general managers who did come through Auburn, again, not necessarily to look at the Les Sneeds of the world, but to some of these other players that went on to have good careers.
Les Sneed, general manager of the Los Angeles Rams, joining me here. Now, walk me through.
Who probably played the longest? Tony Richardson. You remember the fullback?
Of course. Of course.
He probably had a hard knock segment.
Great human, just a great human. Another great, an actual, as well as an even better human than player, Tony Richardson.
Yeah, I think there's a good story, right? He was such a beast even as a true freshman. I think he was running scout team as a true freshman, and somewhere in training camp, right, Pat Dye probably looked over and said, okay, you're no longer on scout team. You're going to go over here with the real guys and help us win as a freshman. So
I love
now and then there's players like that, but he did play a long time as well. So All right. So you had my mind thinking now. It's spinning. I'm remembering good old teammates.
Let's talk about the here and now. Les, I want the straight, like, general manager, inside scoop here. Do you get texts from your colleagues after signing Jalen Ramsey to a record-setting contract like that saying, why'd you do that? What gives? Do you get texts like, come on? Do you get something like that from colleagues?
You get a few of those, but usually the texts you get are going to be from maybe closer comrades that it's more in joking, but as and maybe it's that time of year, right, where you're getting close to keeping score, so you don't get any really serious text.
But there's a germ of truth, even some jokes. Like, I mean, do you, when you make a deal like this, know, okay, I'm setting when I do this, I know that I'm resetting a market for a lot of my colleagues, but I don't care because this is my player and I'm going to do it.
I think that is true, but I do think I think most general managers, even probably the majority of agents, right, probably realize when there is a player who definitely has the chance, the potential, the production to reset a market, and then there's others with the awareness that, okay, maybe not a reset player, but someone who deserves to be, well paid. So I think the awareness definitely sets in amongst, all of us who are in the NFL ecosystem. So you probably have less of that than you would think.
Okay, and then in terms of the next several years, though, the cap maybe being where do things stand on the COVID-19 front with the cap over the next couple of years, and how you're trying to work it into Ramsey, knowing what your Goff contract is, knowing what your Donald contract is? How does that all operate for you right now?
So I'll probably have I'm going to keep it simple,
sure,
and then you can go from there. Now,
okay,
on cap, and then I got about 7 bullet points that'll kind of go overall philosophy, right?
Sure.
So cap-wise, right, the only certainty that we know is at this point, right, early in the season, less fans means less revenue. So there is now a floor on the cap. What the real cap is still uncertain, but we definitely need to prepare for that certainty that what if it does get to 175 based on lost revenue. So that's to be determined. I think end of the day, big picture, and then we can get to specifically Jalen Ramsey, right? Ultimately, as a GM, you have a vision, right, to build something, have this breakthrough, get that playoff piano off your back that, okay, can they win in the playoff and then contend? How can we do that? I think one of the more important things we do, right, is get the right head coach that can engineer an environment that earns wins. You got to stabilize the QB position, and then from there you got to learn to win and maneuver to contend from there. So cap, veterans. So here's one thing we do. It is our calculus formula, right? And let's call it the 17 to 19 Rams since Sean's been our head coach. Is it working? So do we know on the show the formula, the AB? So actual value, kind of an analytics formula. I'm not sure who came up with it, but one way to measure, it's an independent way of measuring players who play, start, produce, get awards. So obviously in the trade, maybe UFA, free agent signings, waiver claims, since 17, we're first in average per contributor in that formula. So that's where a Jalen Ramsey comes in. But when you take on this philosophy and actually start to execute it, and you give up some first rounders for some known contributors,
yes,
definitely need to get on base, hit some doubles, even some triples in the 2nd through 7th round. But in that same, using the AB formula, probably since 17, we're 7th in the NFL in cumulative AV from 2nd through 7th rounders, eliminating the first rounder.
Well, you're not lying, Les, that you said you were going to keep it simple and then get a little bit more bullet point complicated after that. And in terms of, hitting the doubles and triples in the draft, as well as maybe some undrafted free agents and and whatnot. I do want to hit you with a couple of conventional wisdom. And I know that they call it that because it's conventional. No Gurley and running back by committee, and then Cooks is gone, and wondering who's going to be catching passes along with Kupp and Woods for your franchise quarterback. Let's take it one at a time. Their running game is going to look like what this year?
Well, I think the running game's still to be determined. And what we do know is we really like where Cam's at, and he's ready to roll, even though no offseason. We have a very, very stable, let's call it veteran, that stabilized that room in Malcolm Brown, who's been very successful for us. Probably had some of the more tough yards since 2017 for us in 4-minute situations, right? And that's when you're trying to close out a game, and basically everybody in the stands and everybody on television knows they're going to try to run out the clock, and the running back's getting the ball. He's been successful there. So I think between those two, mix in D. Henderson when he does get healthy and primed, and go from there. So at this point, right, committee approach. And usually from there will be either a hot hand or someone who proves it. You know what? Hand me the ball more than the next guy. So that's still to be determined, but we do like that approach.
And then the passing game, what's that going to look like?
I think that, I think Sean's been at his best when we can distribute the football. I think if you've looked at, and if you really analyzed our, who gets the ball, when they get the ball, how often they get the ball, how many yards after they get the ball, from our top 3 receivers, whether it's been Brandon Cooks, Robert Woods, Sammy Watkins, Cooper Kupp. I mean, we definitely distribute the football to not only them, but the tight end, to the running backs, as Sean calls them, the 5 eligibles. In that, we're going to definitely need Van Jefferson to step up, and he's been doing that in practice. But as Allen Iverson has said, eloquently,
yes,
practice is practice.
Right. And then so the tight ends, there's going to be a bit more of a focus as well this year, I imagine. Correct? I don't want you to give up too much of the ghost here on the Rich Eisen Show.
Shouldn't give up that, but we do like our tight ends, and I do know Sean has in his DNA, the ability to and we've done that plenty, right?
Sure.
Run multiple tight ends, and we'll see what we do. But the goal for us, I think, is whether it's tight ends, whether it's receivers, whether it's running backs, is be able to run the ball. And that doesn't necessarily mean the receivers got to catch the football. They got to be Hines Wardish at times, and actually be an offensive tackle or fullback or tight end, and go back to those days when Pittsburgh, everybody knew they were going to hand it to 36, but Hines Ward could block like a tight end, so that was very effective. And then you can marry that whole run game with the pass game. And the goal, when everybody says marry run with pass,
yep,
that means when you line up, right, and the quarterback's either under center or taking, the snap from the gun, you can't really look down there and go, you know what, I think they're going to do this. And then when the play starts and the whole action of the running backs and quarterbacks, and it just looks like it could be run or pass early. And I love it. And that's the goal.
And usually from the same damn formation, too. It's so much fun to watch when Sean McVay is dialing it up. And a couple more questions left for you, Les. Let's start with your new defensive coordinator. Who is he, and what'd you like about him, and what's he going to do something in a way that the son of Bum did so well for you over the last several years?
So first of all, Brandon Staley, right?
Yep.
Everybody should get to know Brandon Staley. One of the reasons Sean was very impressed with Brandon, and the initial, let's call it attraction, started with what Vic Fangio's done over his career at many different stops, wherever that was at. And then Sean competing against Vic, and kind of how they have evolved. Let's call it. Vic back in the Harbaugh NFC West days and I was a part of that. And it was some ground and pound going on. But now the NFL is spreading out a little bit. But to see Vic evolve and still be a very formative foe in terms of defensive football. So that DNA was very interesting, and Sean was curious to tap into it. And then once you meet Brandon, you sit and interview, and very similar to Sean, probably about 6 to 8 minutes into an interview, you realize, okay, wait a minute. They're Rain Man, they're high-end physicists, or they're working at SpaceX putting rockets in space. It just happens to be, X's and O's versus whatever Apple and Microsoft are doing in their code, right? They got different letters. Football does X and O's, and Microsoft, Apple does.
They do their own PhD. I love it. And I'd love being around guys like that. And then in terms of your job, Les, I don't know if you took public health classes at UAB or Auburn when you were there, but we all have to be somewhat more up to speed on it now. Are you quarantining a quarterback? How is COVID affecting your gig this fall, do you think?
Well, we're taking the approach right now, probably a less extreme measure, maybe Philly, if it's true. Now, this was my teenagers telling me that Philly was signing Josh and keeping him in Texas, but
right.
They're the ones that get let's call it the social media reports on the hour. So they keep me abreast of the NFL. That's how GMs do it. Now, I think the nice thing about what's been going on, I think the PA, the NFL, and then everyone involved executing it, from staff, coaches, players, we're showing that there's an element of discipline outside of the building to not bring the disease here. Now, that's been right, as Allen Iverson said, just at practice. We hadn't started traveling yet. But I do think some of the technology that we use here that may be different than other places that can tell you on a day-to-day basis, how close you are and how much time are you spending in the warning proximity, that allows you to then let's call it do an after-action review and say maybe we ought to split some people out, keep them a little bit farther apart, so that if there is an unfortunate outbreak within, each player isn't at that point in a warning zone. So we're going to kind of take that approach early and see how it works. But we definitely have discussed it on a week-to-week basis on what is the best measure to make sure key positions, I guess you'd call it, preparing for the most catastrophic, if you can say, losing a player for an NFL football game is catastrophic.
No, I understand that. Les, we're talking about. No, you're talking about what, and I understand, and I appreciate you giving that caveat, because we know what catastrophic in the era of COVID is. And I hope nobody is thinking that you would ever use that cavalierly. But for your job to put football players on the field, and we are, we're in the season, and you're in the construct of having to win football games because that is what your job is. No, having basically Jared Goff testing positive on a Saturday, that would be catastrophic, certainly if it's before an NFC championship game. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the sort of thing that I'm wondering how a general manager can plan for.
Well, it's interesting. We did have a mantra in the building, right? And we're to that week where, we're going to keep score, and those scores are going to be recorded, and they're going to show up in standings, and people like yourself are going to analyze those scores and standings throughout the season. So we've said within the building, hey, let's remember the mantra. We're here to win games, and this year we'll add it as safely as possible. And that's always the case, because football is a dangerous sport with the athletic performance, but now you actually have to add the asterisks and do some things out of the box because of the pandemic. But, Rich, you made the biggest point ever, because obviously when I bored you to death with my bullet points, I think I got through 6. And the most important one was all of that I just said that y'all are probably going to cut out of your show or what have you, not making the house. All of those 6 better do one thing: better win games. And So in our formula, right, since 2017, we're fourth in wins. So however you analyze what you're doing, and we know that you can be biased in looking at it, it does need to equal wins. So you make a good important point there, right? We're getting to a point in the season where wins do matter.
Definitely right. And it starts, oh my gosh, Cowboys in the new building on Sunday night. That's going to be amazing. Enjoy that, despite the fact
you know what's amazing? There's a game tonight, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. We have made it.
Sure, y'all been talking about it.
A little bit. We might talk about it a little bit more. Because the guys who met you must be like, don't come at me for Jalen Ramsey contract numbers. Why don't you go with that whole $500 million 10-year deal, right? I mean, you want to talk about busting norms. That's a norm buster.
But you got to hand it to Lee Steinberg and his group, right? If there was going to be someone to be creative and go out of the box, it seems fitting that it would not be ironic. It would be coincidental that it was him.
Well, I mean, it's a platinum box now. And by the way, I'm just wondering, is Lee holding you up in a negotiation? Are you using this show to butter him up a little bit? Is that what you just did?
You know what? Do not have. Probably if I only had one player since Lee. No, you know what? I should say this, but no negotiations yet. Lee Steinberg and his partner Chris Cabot have Darrell Henderson. So
there you go. All right, very good. Hey, Les, thanks for the time. Greatly appreciate it. I think Don Bowie, my coordinator producer, executive producers, put a little split screen together. You with Thomas Dimitroff right there. Hair on hair. Who takes this one down, Les? Seriously.
Well, I think just let's call it all things considered. Thomas, and maybe it's the socks he wears. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? That hair, but he's grayed more than I have.
Yes.
But he's definitely done that. But I think total package, Thomas wins. But probably took expensive accessories to get there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you just wake up looking like that, I'm sure. And Thomas, he definitely leads NFL GMs in the lava lamp department, I think, if I had to guess.
No doubt. No doubt. And we all know Thomas now as successful GM. Everyone should have got a chance to know Thomas when he was living in Boulder, Colorado, as the director of college scouting.
These are guys
There's
who go
skeletons in those clubs.
That's what I'll say. Oh, gee, it's on behalf of Thomas. We're out of time. Thanks for the time, Les. Enjoy the season.
That's when the show would have really gotten.
That's
you got to go to your advertisement. You got to pay the bill.
We do, and I appreciate the time. You take care of yourself, Les.
All right, see you. Thanks for having me.
That's Les Snead. Is he buttoned up on the numbers? What do you think? On the bullet points and the numbers and knowing what they are since this time to that time and where this guy can play? Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.